What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the overall market and why this will affect Tesla, what's happening for this week that will move the share price, and I'm also going to give you guys my price prediction for tomorrow and this week for Tesla moving forward. Before I break anything down about what the news, data, and technicals are telling us about Tesla and also the overall market for many different tickers like Nvda and Apple and SPY and etc., I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed up to 10 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. The offer ends very soon, but this will be the last day I promote this anyways, so please check it out before they run out, before I stop promoting this offer. And with that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was down 2.38% for the day on Friday, and overall the MACD has this crossover, but the bearish momentum is starting to weaken a bit. Tesla is below many of the important EMAs, hovering below the 5 EMA alongside the 200 and the 50, and it is very close to being in oversold territory. Now, there is a bullish divergence that's developing on Tesla, which tells me a bounce will come relatively soon, most likely, but the extent of the bounce will depend on the catalysts, and the news that's coming out. And I'm going to break down the formation right here on Tesla, because yes, you could argue that there's a head and shoulders like pattern that's forming. We have this like left shoulder right here. There's like a head that could be forming, and maybe Tesla's about to form this right shoulder before it continues to see more downside. However, when you look at SPY and the NASDAQ and the QQQ, there are lots of signals suggesting that downside is coming over the next few weeks for the markets, and that in turn will affect Tesla, leading to more potential downside. I know it's unfortunate, and I'm not saying it has to happen immediately, but it is important to be ready for this as a big investor. Now, why may the market see lots of downside over the next couple of weeks? Could it be a black swan event? Could it be more bank failures? They're all very possible. But one of the biggest things that's coming would be the debt ceiling fiasco. What tends to happen is politics gets in the way, and this has continued to be like battled for many, many weeks approaching the deadline, and may continue until the deadline, if not a little bit later than it. And that's leading to lots of fears of a default, right? This impacts the entire finance sector. And moving forward, Wall Street could use this easily as an excuse to cause more downside, to incite lots of fear, thanks to many mainstream outlets and other factors going forward. So, why is that important? Well, Wall Street, if the market is pumping and Wall Street is planning this, they might be using any pump, right? Because for the short term, I've been talking about a potential bounce. They might use this as a very good shorting opportunity, because the bigger move most likely is going to be downside over the next couple of weeks. And this is a big opportunity for a lot of people out there. Now, my opinion could change depending on the levels and the catalysts, but as of right now, looking at the data and the overwhelming amount of bearish catalysts, the odds are favoring the downside. I will talk about other catalysts in just a couple of minutes. I also want to note that we have earnings coming out. We have Monday.com, we have the Home Depot. We also have Target and Cisco and Wix for Wednesday. Then for Thursday, we have Alibaba alongside Walmart and Ross. The biggest days are going to be, in my opinion, Wednesday and Thursday. Most of the data is not that important or that massive, though. Not as big of a day compared to the last few weeks when we had like big tech earnings. But for tomorrow specifically, don't forget, we're starting off the copious Fed speakers' speeches. And this is going to be super important, because in the beginning, 45 minutes before the market opens, we have Bostic speaking. The market will most likely see some downside because of them. But then 15 minutes before the market opens, a little bit later, we have Kashkari. When Kashkari talks, the market tends to pump. The market tends to like it. That's what typically happens, right? So I'm not guaranteeing that all of these outcomes are objectively what will happen, but it's very likely given their histories and how they tend to speak. Now, when it comes to Kashkari, he's likely going to help the market, but after a couple of hours, 3 hours after the market opens, we have Barkin speaking. And when Barkin speaks, the market tends to see some downside too, typically. Now, that's important to note, because all of this will affect the market. And you have to be ready, because this week we're going to see a lot of reactions to the Fed speakers. If they tend to be more hawkish, this will cause more downside. But once again, always be open minded. But always remember something else, and that is the most likely thing would be even if we do chomp around and we just see lots of sideways action for the next few days, even if that happens because of the Fed speakers, the odds still heavily favor downside for the June period as we approach June. I have not backed out on that claim. The only way for me to stop or even like change my mind would be if SPY breaks certain levels, if the market shows even more strength and we get bullish signals, and if we get a bullish catalyst. As of right now, we're not getting it. So that's why I'm still heavily inclined and in favor of the bears for now. All right. So now, as far as SPY goes for tomorrow, we only have about 120,000 calls expiring, alongside about 200,000 puts expiring. So a 1.68 put to call ratio, heavily favoring. Right now, it's favoring like more bears. There are a lot more bears that are continuing to short the market. Market makers may try to close us around 411, so we could get a flat close tomorrow. And it's very likely the market might pump in the morning and sell off later on because of the Fed speakers. And that's what I'm basically leaning towards. But like I said before, I'd be very careful. Even if we do get these pumps in the market, this could be a very good shorting opportunity for the long term. Not financial advice, by the way. As far as Tesla goes, we had 158 million in volume, well above average, which is a good sign typically, because if Tesla does pump on this high volume, it could lead to more buying pressure too. However, we sold off on it, at least as of Friday, which is showing some weakness, but it was not a major sell off. We're only down about 2%. So, very mixed volume. If it works in Tesla's favor, it could become good. But for now, it's just kind of in the middle, not too great. The short volume is starting to drop a little bit. If it continues to drop, this could help Tesla's price action. And on top of that, the price price ratio is getting very flat and might start to drop a little bit because of Tesla underperforming. But if Tesla tries to rebound even stronger than the markets, then it could once again maintain these levels, which would be a good sign. Now, Wedbush has come out and they're saying that they're basically reiterating that Tesla's likely going to outperform the markets. They said this just 3 days ago. And that's a good sign for Tesla. But they haven't really changed their stance. They did not say to sell Tesla. They've been saying it's going to outperform. They're reiterating their point. Tesla sees a lot of resistance. Okay, the heaviest resistance is right here around this like 177 area. There's not major support very close to where we are, except around like 166, around that zone. So that's going to be the next major support, and then there's 163 after that. As far as seasonality goes, Tesla tends to be green 53% of the time on Mondays, so that's a good sign. And for the month of May, Tesla's green only about 54% of the time. So not the strongest of months. It tends to be weak compared to June. And then from an hourly basis, just note that Tesla tends to do very well during the second hour. Its strongest hour tends to be the fourth hour, the fourth and fifth hours of the day, and it tends to be a little bit weaker by the last hour of the day too. So be wary of this. This is just previous data. It does not guarantee anything, but it is important to note. Now, one bearish thing is the fact that a few days ago we saw about 31 million Tesla shares shorted. And that's why what I predicted did come true about how Tesla would pump to about 178 and get that rejection. Why? Because the shorts started shorting very hard up here. They started smacking Tesla down. That's why Tesla went from 177 down to 167 in just one day. This was because of lots of shorting. Shorting played a big role. And when we see so much shorting in just one day, there's a lot of hedging that goes on. The market makers get involved too, which leads to more downside for the price, right? If there's a lot of like put buying and short positions being opened, it leads to manipulation and more bearish price action. As far as Tesla goes, looking at the news, we actually have the shareholder meeting in just a couple of days. That's going to be important. We'll see what is announced during it. But if it does not help Tesla break 177, then it's not going to be a good sign, because as long as Tesla remains below this 177 area, this head and shoulders formation is valid. If Tesla remains below 177, if we can't get a break even during like the shareholder meeting or during Jerome Powell's speech on Friday, if it fails to do it, then the odds are just going to heavily favor the downside for the more medium term. To change my mind on Tesla, you have to break this resistance at 177. If not, then like I said before, not looking too good. The inventory levels for the Model 3 are still relatively high. Not the best of signs. I want to see this getting more bought up approaching Memorial Day. But for the Model 3, not the Model 3, the Model Y, sorry about that. The Model Y inventory levels have continued to drop. They came down to a low of about 72. They're currently around 100, but that's a very big drop compared to this right here. This is when the sixth price cut came for Tesla, and we did see a big increase in the amount of Teslas being bought. So that's a good sign. But now let's break down the price action of Tesla. The biggest piece of news affecting Tesla that just came out would be Elon Musk appointing a new CEO for Twitter. That was a good piece of news, but the shorts used it to manipulate the price. Tesla got a bounce, also buying pressure after the news came out. But besides that, it continued to sell off. Now, what else happened was Tesla canceled the all right hand drive Model S and Model X orders. And besides that, I didn't really see too much else that came out. I was looking at the news. There's just nothing too massive besides some talk about their shareholder meeting, and we'll see what news comes out tomorrow morning. Very soon, guys, I'm going to start recording videos in the mornings. I will be able to do that within the next couple of weeks, and I will be around a little bit more, but I won't be able to record as much intraday because I do focus more on running my own businesses and simultaneously trading. And it requires a lot of concentration, and I'm very silent when I do all that stuff. I'm very, very quiet. I need to just concentrate, and that's another one of the reasons why. But once again, I mean, I am open to possibly trading live in the future, just not for now. And I'm always going to be here for you guys. I'm not leaving, so please don't worry. I want the best for everyone. But now let's talk about the markets. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's Mother's Day today. I think I forgot to say Happy Mother's Day. I want to wish a Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. You're loved and appreciated. And please stay strong and never give up on your dreams. I appreciate everyone else here. Anyways, now let's get on with the technical analysis side. So, what I'm seeing on SPY is a potential bullish divergence that could be developing on the 1 hour time frame. It's possible, seeing the fact that we made a higher low on, we made this higher low on the MACD. I'm sorry, we made a lower low compared to the higher low on the price action. Sorry, guys, kind of mixed up right there. So the price made a higher low. The MACD is making this lower low. So this is telling us that we might get a bounce soon. And we're about to get this bullish crossover, right? So that's telling me that, seeing that we're going to be treating these previous support resistance EMAs, we're going to be treating them as resistance, right? This used to be support. Now it's going to become resistance. So likely we're going to see a bounce for the short term, right? A short term bounce. What's interesting is Kashkari happens to be speaking like right before open, so maybe Kashkari helps us bounce. Then we might get a sell-off because of Barkin later on, so we might get a very flat close near max pain. But then moving forward, I am anticipating more downside later on anyways. It could happen as soon as this week, and part of why I'm saying that is because on the bigger time frames on SPY, there's a big bearish divergence that's developing. It happens to be developing around this head and shoulders formation. Why? Because the PPO got a crossover and we're hovering below some very important resistance levels. We failed to break out of the supply zone. And as long as we don't break 417, I'm going to be favoring the bears. Sorry, the bears right now. Now, let me explain something, okay? I'm going to remain open minded because of how crazy the market is. We need a bullish catalyst for the bulls to come out on top, for us to break 417. So far, we're not seeing what that's going to be. And most of the catalysts for the next few weeks are in favor of the bears, right? From the debt ceiling to inflationary expectations, and the list goes on. So what I'm trying to say is, okay, if you want to be bullish, if you want to, we have to break 417. So far, it's not looking like we're going to do that. We're getting weaker and weaker right here, trading sideways and shopping. And then on top of that, there's a bearish divergence, a crossover on the PPO. And we have this like left shoulder that developed ahead, and we could be forming a right shoulder soon. So there might be an attempt to bounce and fill this gap first before we start to see a big rejection. And that's where I'm leaning right now. I don't know how big the bounce is going to be if we get to 415 or if we stop a little bit below that. But after that, I mean, it's very likely we're going to come all the way back down to fill this gap very soon, maybe as soon as this week. And we're going to see SPY start to sell off. And that's going to be the bigger move, in my opinion. Now, the only thing that I think that could change this, if the debt ceiling does not get delayed and they just resolve it like very soon, that could change my opinion. Also, Jerome Powell. But for now, like I said, I'm still more fixated on the downside for the more medium term. I just want to remain open minded, anyways. So, what am I thinking for the markets? Just to be clear, given the current catalysts, it's very likely the market's going to try to bounce a little bit for the short term, then see more selling pressure as we approach the month of June. Lots of selling pressure compared to the upside because a lot of gaps are unfilled. There's a bearish divergence and many sell signals telling us that SPY will make its way back to the 390s by the time we're in the June period. For the QQQ, it's also looking more bearish to me. Now, could we pump a little bit temporarily? Yes. But why am I saying it's more bearish? Because first off, look at the negative divergence on the MACD and the RSI. This is a clean, very pretty looking bearish divergence. And on top of that, look at the formation. It's a rising wedge, and that tends to be more bearish. What do I mean by that? We might hold up for a while. Who knows why? It depends on the Fed speakers. QQQ might try to bounce tomorrow because it has a very tiny bullish divergence on the very smaller time frames, but on the bigger time frames, it looks more bearish. What does that mean? For the short term, for like tomorrow, we could get a bounce, a small bounce thanks to this bullish divergence, a very small one. But, but for the medium term, approaching June, just like SPY, the QQQ, the Nasdaq, the S&P 500, they're going to likely see a lot of selling pressure. And I think this rising wedge is going to play out and lead to more downside going forward. The MACD is already telling us that alongside the RSI. And then looking at the support zones, we're below we're below resistance, and we could be approaching the 50 EMA as the next support. So once again, it looks more bearish to me, and I think this will affect Tesla. Tesla has once again this head and shoulders like formation on the 1 hour time frame, which tells me it could try to balance with the market. I don't know if it's going to sell off a little bit more because the MACD is still not curling. I have to see what happens in the pre-market. We have to wait and wake up like an hour before the market opens to just see how it looks. But for now, it's looking like whether it sells off a little bit in the pre-market or not, it's going to try to bounce. That's going to be like the next bigger move, at least for the super short term, try to get a bounce back to like 170 or so. That's what I'm thinking. Depends on the news too, but I am leaning more towards a bounce. And then I don't think that's going to be uh, the biggest move for the medium term. For the short term, yes, it could bounce quite a bit. That is worth noting. But for the medium term, as long as this head and shoulders is valid, as long as Tesla fails to break 178 despite the shareholder meeting, and if the debt ceiling news just continues to invoke more fear amongst investors, alongside the Fed speakers, inflationary expectations, and maybe even more banking collapses, Tesla will likely see more downside approaching June, as long as the situation remains this way, which it most likely will. Okay, so the odds are favoring more downside for the medium term. For the short term, it could try to bounce though. I will talk a little bit more about Tesla, but let me just quickly break down just a couple of tickers. It's Mother's Day. I'm not going to talk for too much longer. For the dollar index, it's starting to break out a bit. If it keeps breaking out, that's going to be bearish for the markets. But it is overbought right now. It might try to cool off first, get closer to like 102 first before it continues to push. But it's looking to me like the dollar is getting ready to break out. There's a bullish divergence on either the daily or the weekly chart. I think it's on the daily. Yeah, so on the daily chart, we have a bullish divergence starting to play out. Okay, it might reject a little bit. Maybe the market just tries to hold it temporarily. But if this thing starts shooting up, if it gets above like 103, 104, 105, that's going to be very bearish for the markets. Okay, I'm warning you guys right now. We're getting some sell signals. Be very careful. It's quite overbought on the shorter time frame, so it might cool off first. But overall, it's going to likely break out, leading to more downside for the medium term. For the short term, if the dollar cools off, that means tomorrow the market could bounce a little bit. But as the dollar breaks out, like I said, the downside is likely going to come for the markets. We're going to just talk about the bigger tickers in this video, try to keep it short. For Microsoft, it could try to bounce a little bit. It had a bullish divergence on the smaller time frame. It could try to get back to like the 310s, but then it's going to likely start selling off. We're about to get a crossover on the daily MACD. So small bounce in the morning before it continues to see downside, and it's going to make its way down to the 300s going forward. There's a bearish divergence as well on the daily chart. So small bounce before more downside for the medium term for Microsoft. That's what I'm seeing. The VIX has a bullish divergence on, I think it's the daily. It should be the daily. Yeah, so on the daily, there's a bullish divergence. Also on the weekly. The VIX is starting to turn more bullish. It's going to get a breakout as we approach June, in my opinion. The odds are heavily in favoring that. That tells me the stock market, the S&P 500, which is going to cause this, has most likely downside coming approaching June. We might bounce a little bit on the S&P 500 for tomorrow, but overall the bigger move is going to be a sell-off as we approach June, most likely. That's what the charts are telling me for now. Once again, remain open-minded because of other catalysts that could change this, but for now, it's very likely, extremely likely, that's going to happen looking at all these signals. On the SQQQ, the same thing. There's a bullish divergence forming, right? When this thing goes up, the QQQ and the Nasdaq go down, basically, right? So we have these unfilled gaps. I think it could drop a little bit more before it gets ready to bounce, and soon it's going to bounce. It's going to break out, which is going to likely lead to more downside for the stock market. Nvidia might bounce and try to get back above 285 to 286 temporarily, but there is a bearish divergence, and Nvidia is likely going to see a lot of downside as we approach the next couple of weeks, going into the next few months, or like month and a half, okay? So anyways, I want to thank you all so much. If you look at Apple, for example, Apple also has a very similar bearish divergence that's forming. It's slowly losing momentum. It's continuing to lose momentum. It's getting weaker and weaker as the days go on. So please be very, very careful looking at it. Apple's going to try to bounce first. It's going to try to make an attempt for 174 again, in my opinion, before it continues to come down. And Apple might get rug pulled by the time we get to June for the next couple of weeks, next month or so, to fill this gap. There's a big gap down below on Apple. I think it's going to fill the gap in the next month. And that's going to lead to more selling pressure for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. Okay, so please be ready for that. The market's very sensitive right now. Last but not least, I think I'm just going to end it from here, guys. I don't want to talk too much longer. It is Mother's Day. For the 10-year Treasury yield, this is starting to push up a bit. If this is running like normal, because there were a lot of instances where it was very weird. It was selling off at the market. That's very unusual. Typically, when this pushes, okay, the market tends to come down. If it gets a breakout, because it is forming, or it was forming a bullish divergence right here, so it might get a breakout going forward. Could be forming like an inverse head and shoulders too, right? If it gets the breakout, that typically would be bearish for the stock market. But I'm not really as inclined to looking at this with as much like seriousness because of how weird and manipulated it has been over the last few days. Okay, but typically, if this breaks out, if the bullish inverse head and shoulders plays out, typically that leads to the market selling off. There is manipulation. That's a big factor in this, which does not make this as strong of an indicator, but it typically is correct. And typically that will help us understand what's about to happen. All right, guys, so that's what I have for this video for Tesla. Look out for a potential bounce. It might try to bounce a little bit, but it also depends on how it opens in the pre-market. So I'll be watching that too. And then after Tesla tries to get the bounce, if it does attempt to do so, I don't consider it a very insignificant move unless it breaks 178. 178, excuse me. It has to break 178 for me to turn bullish. But so far, I don't see that happening. It looks more like it's just going to chop around a little bit before we do see more downside, given all the bearish catalysts. That's what's dictating the stock in the market, in my opinion, for the more medium term. I'm always open to changing my opinion if we get a new catalyst, okay? So I'm always open-minded, but right now I'm leaning more in favor of the bears for the medium term, okay? That's what I have for this video. Thank you all for listening. Have an absolutely spectacular Mother's Day. And don't forget, I have some merch for you guys if you want to buy a cap or a hoodie or a t-shirt that says buy the dip or to the moon or something like that. It really is your choice. I would really appreciate it if it does. If you guys do make that decision, it does help the channel. And don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very, very soon. I will be promoting this for only one more day. In fact, this is going to be the last day I promote this. So please check it out. And with that said, thank you all for listening. Have a great day. Enjoy your Mother's Day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. Tesla to the moon because the long term is very bright. And peace out.